Could the inflammatory rhetoric from the left have caused the second assassination attempt on Donald Trump? Former FBI counterterrorism agent Tim Clemente recently appeared on CNN to explain why he thinks the answer is yes. Matthew Peterson is the editor-in-chief of Blaze News, and Tim Clemente joins us now. So, Tim, thanks so much for joining us. On CNN, you said that the would-be assassin probably was spurned on by much of the political diatribes of our time. So can you dive into that and explain that a little bit more?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I think that it's impossible to separate the vitriol that's been thrown at Donald Trump from the attacks that have been directed at him. It's just not possible to say there's no combination of those two that makes it worse than it would have been without the political diatribes against him. I mean, he's compared to Hitler. What was Hitler? You know, there's the example that people have been using for generations now that if I could kill Hitler when he was a baby, would it be justified to prevent what he did? So if you're going to look at Donald Trump as being anything like an equivalent to Hitler, you're looking at a man that needs to be stopped and killed at any possibility at any point in his life. And so I don't think it's possible that you can have the mentally deranged human beings that we have wandering around our nation at this point not be affected by that kind of vitriol.
Tim, I very much appreciated your appearance on CNN. I thought it was very, very interesting. Can you talk a little bit about this latest would-be assassins? You know, you said, I think he was extremely politically motivated. Can you talk about that sort of motivation and break down the profile of this person in your view?
Well, first of all, Matt, you got a 58-year-old male, a grown man. He's not a 20-something, a young man whose brain is still possibly forming. In the case of the guy in Pennsylvania, I'm not sure his brain ever properly formed. But this individual voted for Trump in 2016, he says. He claims that. I believe him. I have no reason not to believe him. But then he turned against Trump, and he made Trump his enemy. He reached out to Hillary Clinton on social media and asked her to run for the good of the country. And so he obviously did not like some of what Donald Trump did, I guess, as president. I'm not saying that this guy makes any sense at all, because the one thing we can't do is try and use logic and sense to understand what is senseless. But in this guy's mind, I believe that he thinks Trump has become his enemy. And as his enemy, like the enemies in Ukraine that he wanted to fight, I believe this guy was willing to do anything and everything to stop Trump. And it's clear from his intentions on Sunday, laying out there in basically a sniper's nest behind that chain link fence and in those bushes for 12 hours or so, laying in wait behind a rifle with a GoPro camera at the ready, that he was not only going to take Trump out of the equation, but he was going to document it so that, you know, for the sake of posterity and for his own pleasure, he would have that recorded in history. And I think he's mentally deranged, obviously, and that's pretty clear from a lot of what we hear about him. But I think also he's ideologically driven. He had a mindset where he thought Trump was on his side, and once he realized Trump was not on his side ideologically, he became his enemy. And his intention was, of course, to kill Trump because of that.
One of the things that we do know about him is the would-be shooter, that is that he really enjoyed going over to Ukraine and recruiting others to come with him as well. I know. Let's go ahead and take a listen to him explaining what he was doing with Ukraine.
Good morning. Most wonder what I'm doing in Ukraine. This is about a center to help people when they come from other countries around the world have a location, someone to talk to as a greeting committee to get them in the location that they need to be. So that's the whole focus of this project, is to help foreigners be as useful as possible. That's our mission and job here, to get everybody where they need to be to maximize their potential.
So, Tim, when you look at that video and also just know how he was trying to recruit people over to fight in Ukraine, what do you make of that?
I think the objective maybe wasn't so much fighting for Ukraine as it was fighting against Russia. And I think he saw the Russians as the boogeyman, as the bad guys in this, as most of the world does. But I think there's a possibility, and I can't say this with absolute certainty, but with all the vitriolic language that was directed at Donald Trump in his first term, the Russia collusion hoax, It's possible that after 2016, this guy thought Trump was one thing, that he would be the enemy of Russia, and then was listening to all the ridiculous nonsense about Trump being a Russian asset and being very closely aligned with Russia and having been elected because of Russia, that it's possible that this guy just has despised Russia for a long time, and that made him hate Trump and want to go fight in Ukraine. I mean, those two things logically make sense together. Trump has talked about ending the war, not about supporting Ukraine in victory, but about ending the war in Ukraine. And as someone who might think that Ukraine was a tremendous victim here and Russia was a tremendous bully, it might sound like that's unfair of Donald Trump to go after Ukraine to say, hey, you have to give something up so there's a negotiation to settle this. Again, these are speculations on my part, but I'm basing this on what I've seen and heard about this guy, who, again, certainly wasn't of sound mind.
Tim, I want to push a little bit on what based on what some people are saying out there. As editor in chief, I have to entertain a lot of different ideas in my head at the same time. But I want you to sensibly walk me off the ledge, okay? Because if I look at this, as opposed to the last shooter who very much more fits the profile for those of us observing as a lone gun kid who kind of snaps, maybe he was bullied, whatever. Here we have someone who has spent many years, right, both engaged in criminal activity, never going to jail, never going to prison after many felonies in North Carolina, and then spends a lot of time with, not entities that aren't exactly unrelated to the national security interests of the United States and are adjacent to that apparatus. Right? He spends a lot of time doing that. So, okay, maybe he's not mentally all there, but he's mentally there enough to be quoted by the New York Times, to be quoted by Semaphore as someone who's part of the NGO structure right next to the national security apparatus to move money, weapons, and people into Ukraine. I don't have to be a crazy conspiracy theorist, right, to say, and then he 12 hours before Trump appears at this golf course happens to know that the president is going to be there that day. Was he staking him out every Sunday? Was that what he was doing for fun, right? There's a lot of facts here that lend themselves certainly to speculation as to how he was influenced and whether there aren't larger forces at play, be they international or elsewhere. And I just want to throw that to you because I think it's sort of obvious on its face, right? I mean, a lot of people are going to take those facts and say, okay, well, this guy makes Lee Harvey Oswald look like an average citizen, Yeah,
Matt, I really don't know how to answer that other than to say the problem with most large conspiracies is that they break down because secrecy is very hard to keep, especially if you have a large group involved. And, it's why the mafia's famous slogan was two people can keep a secret as long as one of them is dead. And so I don't play into a lot of the bigger conspiracies because it's very hard for more than one person to keep the tale from getting out. Now, it doesn't mean that this guy wasn't a useful tool of the intelligence community or assets related to the intelligence community in Ukraine, and that there could have been some, corrupt or otherwise nefarious individuals that were involved with him and steered him in this direction, suggested it, and maybe even supported him. I don't know. And as far as answering the question of how he knew Trump's whereabouts and that he would be on that golf course, now, it's possible it's a lucky guess. Maybe he knows that Trump likes to play golf on Sundays. And so for the last 16 Sundays, he's been out by the golf course there watching for Trump. And on this Sunday, he decided to act. We won't know until the investigation is completed. And hopefully this is a fairly open investigation and the details are revealed to try and tamp down some of these conspiracies. Because the problem is, especially with the situation in Pennsylvania, that the suspect's exterminated by a sniper round, and then that pretty much ends the dialogue that the FBI and other agencies have with the media. There hasn't been a lot of information revealed since July 13th to the public to assuage some of the public's concerns. And just like 911, if you don't reveal information, people make up their own. And the fact that there were no images of the plane hitting the Pentagon that were clear some people means there was no plane hitting the Pentagon. And I literally get attacked on X and Twitter constantly for having defended the truth of the situation on 9/11, that Al-Qaeda flew planes into the Pentagon, World Trade Center, and into Shanksville, Pennsylvania. So in a case like this, nothing's impossible. It's of course possible that this guy was a tool and that he was used as a tool on Sunday as well. And hopefully we'll find that out. Hopefully there'll be communications. There'll be, hard copies of documentation to record what his record was, as if he did work with the NGOs and the intelligence community. And then maybe we'll have some names associated with that can be looked at more closely and see if there was anybody on the government side that may have been involved in this, because we can say for a fact that there are a lot of people in the United States government that very much dislike Donald Trump.
Absolutely. Tim, the great thing, and I just want to praise you again, I really thought it was a masterful interview on CNN. And I think you articulated what a lot of people in this country on both sides think, who are regular people, which is that there seems to be an okay, a get out of jail free card when it comes to rhetoric against Donald Trump. And I think honest people on both sides, I think it's a non-partisan point. But do you have any thoughts about why, this seems to be so one-sided, that rhetoric seems to be condemned on one side and not the other? And you've been in the media and the FBI. You have an interesting background. What is your understanding of how we get out of this? I mean, do you think it's lopsided? And then how do we get out of this situation and restore some kind of regular dialogue in this country?
It's completely lopsided. And I think the problem is Donald Trump is an outsider, and he's the highest ranking outsider in American history. I don't think we've had another president that just came from totally outside of politics, outside of any party, outside of the military, outside of the government itself in any capacity, and rose to that the rank of commander-in-chief of the United States military and the president of the United States. And I think there's a lot of animosity for him because of that, because he doesn't have all of the chits, CHITS, that people have in his basket, saying, you owe me for this because I did this for you. All those political favors that politicians rise having to gather and use to get to their, the pinnacle of their careers. And, you can see that Joe Biden obviously had many, not just domestically in politics, but internationally. And Kamala Harris obviously has hers. She was very intimately friendly with some high-level politicians, Willie Brown especially in California, that helped her ascend to the highest ranks in California. And I'm sure she has a lot of other people she's paid favors to or owe favors to now that she's trying to rise to the presidency. Donald Trump didn't have that. He was even if you don't want to call him a self-made man, because he inherited some of the business and obviously some of the wealth from his father, he still is a businessman that was outside of government completely. And because of that, nobody can put pressure on him. And I think that really disturbs a lot of people in Washington, because there's no way to pull his strings. Sure, you can get him mad, as you saw last Tuesday, and you can get under his skin by saying things, but you can't make him do anything he doesn't want to do. Nobody's got anything that they can hold over him. They've tried the lawfare, they've tried attacking his business, and it just doesn't work. Donald Trump is his own man. And, we can all wish that he was more articulate and could speak like Ronald Reagan and didn't tweet like a 9-year-old. But, if that's what you get, and the end result is a guy that's a solid leader that actually cares about America, well, there's 75 or 80 million people that will accept that and vote for him.